It is Friday morning and we are back with a big issue on Capital FM 99.7. My guest this morning is international seed expert and agriculturalist Mr. Marx Mbunji. This morning we are going to focus on agribusiness or the business of agriculture. I'm your host, Chanda, MWIKO, and Mr. Mbunji, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Chanda.
Yeah, we will get into this, but let's do this. Let's find out your views about the new appointments in the ministries of livestock and agriculture. What do you think about the appointment of Minister Mutolo Piri and Mr. Makozo Chikote?
Chanda, I think that I would be very limited in giving my personal view on the appointments, because I think that, firstly, that appointments are the preserve of the president. And it takes a lot to reach a point of making those appointments, with a lot of other considerations that he brings into his mind. So reaching the appointments of the two, I think it's been a well-considered consideration by the head of state. But suffice to say that at least one of them, Mr. Mutolo, has been with the sector for some time. He's one of those officers who started the Food Reserve Agency,
yes, alongside
Honorable Chance Kavae. I think that should have been around 1996. And he served, as a 2IC to the CEO. Okay. So he's been in the sector, he's been in the commodity section of the agricultural sector, and I think his pedigree speaks well for him. I'm not sure about, I just don't know about the livestock minister.
Mr. Chikote?
Mr. Chikote, yes.
Okay.
I have not followed him.
Okay. All right, let's see. Have you had the chance of reading the UPND manifesto on the policy regarding agriculture? And if so, then what are your comments on the UPND's manifesto on agriculture regarding agro-processing and agriculture, productivity, extension services, market access, and agribusiness in general?
Chand, I think by and large, the UPND manifesto it's also quite similar to the PF manifesto. But I think there are a few key things that UPND has brought as a differentiators. The first is they are calling it transformational.
Okay.
So it's leading in a transformational agenda. Second is that the agricultural approach, agriculture has been picked as one of the job-rich sectors. So there's now an element of employment generation, which is being emphasized. Then the transformational aspect. So these are the key two, I think, overriding factors which UPND expects to deliver a viable commercial agricultural undertaking. And secondly, they think that by being viable commercially, it will also be able to deliver national food and nutrition security and and anchor Zambia as a regional food basket. So those to me are the key elements about the manifesto, and upon which we should measure, the delivery of that manifesto. But having said that, that's a bit similar with the PF, because they both speak about production and productivity of crops, livestock, and fisheries. They both talk about diversification. They all talk about markets and trade. They all touch on issues of agro-processing or value addition. So in those major aspects, they definitely carry the similar topics. But then the levels of emphasis and purpose, I think that's where we get the differentiation, at least up to this stage. But as we go down, it will finally, get down to what sort of strategies are they applying to achieve that, and what sort of oversights to make sure that they remain consistent with the manifesto. Because if you look just at manifesto level, you can be, on paper they look good. Yeah. But if you look at the process of developing a manifesto and delivering it, one, you've got experts who do nothing but to write a good selling document to the Zambians. And that's what the manifesto is. Then second, you now come to the level of implementation. And in implementation, you've got different players. You've got, for example, the minister and the peers.
Yes.
Those are you can say, the driver and navigator of the manifesto. But they don't work alone. They have to work with the civil service. And the civil service has a way that they operate. And then you've got, so the initial part is the drafters of the manifesto.
Yeah.
Second, the implementers, who are the minister, the driver and the navigator. And then you've got the implementers now, who drive the whole thing, like the passengers pushing the car.
Yes.
This is the civil service. Now, all these are operating at different levels and different levels of expectations. Some of the failures of manifestos are actually seen through the differentiation between the inspiration of those who drafted the manifesto versus the capacity of those who are going to drive the manifesto.
Yes.
Because it's not the same people who write who end up implementing. If we had that sort of arrangement, I think a lot of manifestos would have seen, the day of light, and people would have benefited a lot from what is written. But there's usually this misnomer between those who write and have the inspiration of what they would have loved to see, and then those who implement. And they implement in a certain context, which is the civil service. So the pace, process, and purposes of achieving exactly what was in the manifesto, that's where they don't usually match. But these are things we need to watch with the new administration.
Okay, so let me push in the corner here.
Yeah.
We have a new Minister of Agriculture.
Correct.
All right, and we've got somebody new at Livestock as well. These are two gentlemen who are going to work with the same CEOs, PSs, from the previous administration. And having seen failures of the last regime, what would you say about the executive team now surrounding these two people?
Look, the dust is yet to settle, Chanda. What has happened is basically that, yes, the president has appointed his cabinet. I think it's going to come to the next level. Now, they've given a statement to say some of the serving permanent secretaries will continue. So depending on how they've performed in the past, they will be judged as such. But usually, jobs like permanent secretary are departure lounge jobs, Once one administration changes, everyone gets ready to also pack their bags and give the new administration a chance to choose other people to run with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you off the hook there. Let's talk about this issue called diversification. We've been hearing this word from government about diversifying our economy from mineral-based to agricultural-based. What would you say should be the first thing that the new administration should do to make this happen?
From my perspective, I think that it's important that we get all the productive assets of agriculture to work.
Yes.
What I mean is, let's get all the production sections. We have small-scale farmers, we have emergent farmers, we have commercial farmers. We need to create greater capacity in each of them.
Yes.
Each of these sections need to be productive. That is, to me, is number one. And secondly, we also need to sort up the markets, to facilitate markets so that our markets continue to be vibrant throughout the year, 365 days of the year, and just focus on making sure that Zambia is anchored as a regional food basket.
Yes.
So that feeding Zambia becomes a consequence, not a priority. Because look, Chanda, the country has run now for 2 decades in surplus, in crop surplus. And maize here plays a very big role.
Yes.
Make no mistake, in the agricultural sector, it's probably the most industrialized crop, even in the region, probably outside South Africa. Zambia is the most industrialized in terms of processing maize. Maize is the most traded commodity. If you look at the tonnages and how it's moved across the country, so it's still a very big crop. It's the one that has got the most diverse products that comes out of maize. So it's still a very important crop. So we need to get those markets right so that they continue to remain vibrant throughout the year, not only on maize, but then also the other crops. If you look generally, our most industrialized crops in Zambia now, we'll be talking about maize, you'll be talking about soybeans, you'll be talking about wheat. The other crops, they come and play and then they move out.
Yes.
So we need to enhance all these immediately and take a regional positioning. So two things: get our productive assets to work, and also get the markets operating and operating freely. Freely.
Get our productive assets in a roll, sort them out, and then move on. All right. So we're gonna. You spoke about Zambia having, in the last 20 years, been producing in surplus.
Yeah.
Okay. So let us see, from a commercial perspective, let's discuss the export of produce from Zambia and the available produce, the immediate market, and the benefits or gains. How can we balance this with the right imports that will not harm local production?
Chanda, I think first of all, let's corner imports as products that are required at a time of need, at a time of shortage. But we are sitting now in a position of surplus, and this has been for 2 decades. Now, having been in surplus for 2 decades, we have to take some important positioning. And this positioning, I think, was earlier touched on by the late President, His Excellency Levi Patrick Mwanawasa, when he took over government, in 2001. He found the country in complete shortage. And at that time, there was a lot of persuasion for him to consider bring on board GMOs.
Yes.
But he didn't yield to that persuasion. If anything, that was the turning point of the country. He decided to be defiant and announced that we're going to feed ourselves with winter maize. Everybody laughed. But that's what stimulates innovation. The scientists went to work and they realized that, yes, Zambia has got regions where we can actually produce maize off-season, which would have still the similar temperatures that we can have during the rain season.
Yes.
And we went to work and didn't take long. We were able to feed ourselves that year. We survived without eating a single grain of GMO. And that was a major turning point, which we have not harnessed. What am I saying? We needed to have picked up from there, and we have positioned ourselves very well, globally known as a country that produces conventional maize or conventional crops.
Yes.
Then we should take advantage of us marketing our conventional crops. Take advantage of marketing our conventional crops by positioning ourselves in the region. So, and research has shown that given a choice between GMO and conventional food, people would like to eat conventional food.
Yes.
So why haven't we taken advantage of that, branded all our products as non-GMO, and market ourselves to the region? So we would then have no competition, because the only other competition we have in the region is South Africa. But South Africa's, for example, maize is 90% GMO. Their soyas are GMO. Their wheat is GMO. So we are well positioned, especially where food is concerned. So we should have taken advantage of that. And then, because we have already been 2 decades of food security nationally, we should now speak regional food security coming out of Zambia. And that positioning is what can make this country get great through agricultural production and hiving ourselves away from the minerals. That is only what? That's only maize.
Yes.
Look at soybeans. Soybeans is driven mostly by, exports are driven mostly by the soy cake for livestock feed formulations across the region.
Yes.
That's another big crop. Even the crushing capacity within the country is just so big, it outstrips the supply. So, and the region is also waiting. So we're sitting on that. We have challenges, yes, with wheat because our cost of production is higher. But these 2 rain-fed crops, then look at tobacco. People are saying, oh, no tobacco, but look, China still smokes. And that's almost half the world. That's half the world population. we are in that position. The value you can get from one tree, I think you used to make tobacco, is more valuable than what we are getting out of charcoal for brine T-bones and stuff. So that aside, but there are other methods with which tobacco can be treated. The cotton also seeds. It's a global commodity.
Yes.
So we have all these avenues for exports, and I think that the tone that I hear from the president, sets very good ground for us exploiting all these avenues and different products for us to anchor ourselves as a regional hub for food supply.
Do you think we should have a deliberate policy for maize, soya, tobacco, and cotton?
I think each one of them requires a different outlook. Requires a different outlook. I think we don't have much problems with most of the other crops. The problem crop is maize. And for whatever reason, I don't even understand. You see, because the other crops, their trade goes on. There's not much regulation. But when it comes to maize, everyone becomes an expert. And we lose it.
Yeah.
And we lose it. Because look, if you're talking about transboundary markets,
yes,
they're opportunistic. And so you need to be responsive in an opportunistic manner. You can't afford to treat them like, okay, I can do it tomorrow or the other day. No, let me first talk to somebody else. No, you need to be ready for it. When it happens, you are there and you deliver on it. And this is why we have lost some of our business, especially on maize, to South Africa, because we've just not been responsive. So these are things that we need to put our hands on, and people need to be serious about it, need to be passionate about this, so that the country measured itself away from this. And the policies, if there are any policies that tend to limit this, and mostly it's been on the maize, the most hindering for us to grow is actually this issue of banning exports, closing boundaries, just for the purpose of showing power. That's wrong. The country has been losing, because when we have so much crop and you're expecting more crop to come, you should be able to get rid of your crop in a projected way, so that you're always creaming your export markets. And imagine that Zambia is the only one with conventional maize. How much can you ask for it? People would pay anything for it.
So we need to depoliticize maize.
Completely. Completely. And we cannot depoliticize it by making sure that our production systems target regional food security. Because we already, so that feeding Zambia should just become a consequence. I'll give you an example, Chanda.
Yes.
In the seed sector, have you ever heard people complain about seed?
No.
No. Why?
You guys in the seed sector are organized.
Not just organized, but these things have been worked on and developed over time.
Yes.
In the early 1980s, this country was only, selling open pollinated, maize seed. But around the 70s, people said, no, we have to stop this agricultural apartheid, I may call it. You may wonder why I'm using that term, because at that time, many commercial farmers were importing SR52 from Zimbabwe, which was a hybrid, and was probably the biggest hybrid of the whole region. And then the small-scale farmers were being given what is called Gregory King, a population of maize, which is open-pollinated, which is very low-yielding. So you already had segregation in the production system itself. And that was wrong. So there are men and women who sat up and said, no, we need to correct this. And that's how Zamseed was born. Born with Zamseed, alongside seed services were also established to make sure that they put an oversight over the production system. Then distribution was also anchored through Zamseed, but mainly through the cooperative. So this thing was building up. You may wish to know that you see a Zamseed depot in Kapiri, and there's a Zamseed depot in Mazabuka. Those two depots were not built by Zamseed. They were actually built out of funding support that came from the Swedish government for the sole purpose of national seed security, so that we have enough storage for seed security for the country. But then with opening up of the markets, more players have come. To tell you the truth today, all big seed houses of the world are here in Zambia, purely as a production base. Why? Because we have developed a very strong seed grower base in the country. We have developed very strong quality control services or quality assurance services with policies in the country, to the extent that we are represented on the international body that oversees seed certification globally.
Globally, yeah.
Now, why has it changed that Zambia does not run out of seed? By policy, the private sector itself, they always have to carry over 30% of their production. And because they are producing for the region, or in fact, some of our seed go as far as Argentina, if you may wish to know. Because they are producing for the region, their production far surpasses the Zambian consumption. So supplying Zambia becomes a consequence because their production is huge. And we have done that as Zambia. This is a world-class industry, the seed industry we have in the country. So if we have done that in the seeds, why can't we do it for grain? It's the same
model.
Same model. We can do it for grain. And then put to bed all these issues of millers were asking for aid, supply them food, aid, supply them grain. They want to reduce the price. No, they're increasing the... All these things will fizzle out.
I hope there's a politician listening. I'm going to say something. The reason it has worked is because of the system you spoke about, but mainly because I think they failed to understand it. So they've left it. They've left you alone to just run it professionally, because the day this person called a politician understands, they'll come in and meddle.
No, how? Because we work with government. The system outside the quality control or quality assurance system is a government service. But look at how they work. They work like a private sector organization. They work over weekends because they've got to meet the private sector demand.
Yes.
And I think that model we will have in the seed sector, especially in the seed services or seed assurance system from government, we need to replicate that in most of the government institutions, and it could work.
Okay, we'll come back to the seeds later, but something to discuss concerning seeds. Let's go to the other spectrum, something that we don't normally talk about, citrus.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that normally. So Zambia has excellent and suitable climatic conditions, soils, and adequate water for the successful production of citrus fruits. I think we have the largest number of water bodies in the region, but we import a lot of fruit, especially from South Africa. Can you shed more light on the inherent potential for local citrus production?
Correct, Chanda. And then you have to put them into context. Citrus fruits, you've got tropical and temperate. So the temperate citrus, yes, we can struggle because we don't have those climatic conditions. The interesting part with Zambia is its diversity of environments. The good side is you get places like Mbala, Pika, Katete, where temperatures drop, quite significantly. So in those areas, you could even attempt to grow some of the temperate crops. So it's not like we don't have a production basis. And you know what? Every administration that has come always acknowledges these things. We have more than 40 million hectares of land, with huge surface water, surface and underground water, very fertile. So all these things, good rainfall, all these acknowledged.
Part of the speech.
Yes. But we now need to move from speech to action to make sure that is done. So coming back to citrus,
yes,
that's a sleeping giant. Why? Zambia can produce all the tropical crops, all the tropical fruit trees, called the mangoes, oranges, guavas, lemons, avocado, all these, they can easily be produced. But we have just not put programs to them. So I am hoping that the transformation of this farmer input support program, this time, capture and include, these other crops to be supported. I mean, if you look at Western Province,
yes,
the whole country, where can you get a better mango than from Western Province? But what are we doing with all those mangoes?
Is it Western or Eastern?
Western.
Okay.
The Eastern Province mangoes are smaller.
Okay.
When you get them into Western Province, they yield even bigger.
All right.
Yeah, so you get them, they are more fleshy and, the beautiful mangoes. So what have we done to that? And this region, gone to Katete, behind the hills there, people grow beautiful oranges. What are we doing beyond selling them at the bus stop? How many other people have come into those production systems? How are we growing those sectors? To tell you the truth, the whole agricultural sector, all the camp officers, they've been taught how to graft and how to bud seedlings.
Mm-hmm.
And we have such a huge capacity just sitting. Those would be the guys who can drive the nurseries and then bring more people from private sector to develop their own nursery. I can see Lusaka is beginning to activate, but we can do it even bigger. I think we can do it bigger. So we have no excuse why we should import mangoes from South Africa. We have no excuse why we should import bananas, why we should import oranges. Those are crops Zambia should grow.
Mm-hmm.
And if this transformational agenda is going to capture those, the culture will be different.
Donovan Chola Mkabaila has a comment. He says agriculture can only be business if it can be cost reflective. This is an observer from Facebook.
It's a correct statement. That's correct.
Expand more on that.
Well, what is trying to, I think, sensitize us to is, for example, we have the Farmer Support Program, which is a subsidized program, but only covers a certain portion of the production, producing farmers. So in that sense, it's maybe not cost reflective. Secondly, if you control the price, which I think we have gone past, Zambia has gone past controlling prices. What price the government announces is purely food reserve price. Other buyers in the market, they also buy their own prices. So yeah, if it's cost reflective, it's perfect. But cost reflectiveness also has to do with the efficiency of the producers.
Yes, the yield quality and all that.
Correct.
We've spoken about citrus. We're touching on many of these.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see if we can talk about horticulture. All right. Over 60 varieties of rose flowers, and 7 varieties of summer flowers are grown in Zambia. Mm-hmm. Are we still exporting flowers to Europe? And then, before you answer that, listen to this. Our horticulture sector comprises baby corn, fine beans, sugar snaps, spring onion, patty pans, chilies, manjtu, or you can call them snow peas, okra, baby carrots, green asparagus, and zucchini, or better known locally as baby marrow. Do we have potential for other vegetables which can be easily grown for small to medium scale farmers?
The answer is simply yes. Even that range of crops you have, you've read through. It gives you a very wide array of what we can do. Mm-hmm. But as you read through them, I could hear that they're all mostly Europe targeted.
Yes.
But there are a lot that you can sell locally,
Hence the question.
If you ask things like asparagus, how many of us may even know what asparagus looks like, So if you drink it in some soup, you should be a very lucky person.
So the initial question was, are we still exporting flowers and these other crops to Europe?
Yes, there are people that are still exporting.
Okay, how do we...
still exporting. Yes. But I think this sector requires a deeper insight. When at the peak of us exporting, I think you saw some shades around NRDC.
Yes.
It was even institutionalized. We're training people that needed to know how to manage that sector of the horticulture. But go there today, they all got dilapidated. They were shamed and they're by the roadside. Shamed to your site.
Eyesore.
So complete eyesore. So these are things that we need to always energize. But I'm hoping that with the legalization of the green leaf chamber, I think that sector may thrive again, because I think there's something around that.
How did I miss that one?
I don't know. I just picked it.
You see how decent I am. Okay, we'll take a short break, and we'll come back. We'll continue we'll explore the issue of permits and exports.
Okay.
All right.
This is Capital FM on 99.7, giving you a platform for diverse views. We know that no nation can develop adequately without embracing diverse views. This is your platform for experiencing different views with the aim of attaining a clear understanding of an issue. Capital FM 99.7, the talk leader.
Welcome back to the big issue on Capital FM 99.7. This morning, our focus of discussion is agribusiness, or the business of agriculture. We're touching on many components of this business. My guest this morning is Mr. Marx Mbunji. He's an international seed expert and agriculturalist. Before the break, we had touched on exports, and now let's explore the issue of permits, Mr. Mbunji. Let us explore the regulation of permits in this country. Imports to cover necessary local requirements, and exports of products or produce that is in excess to requirement, e.g. maize, soya, we spoke about, soya cake, bran and timber. Your views?
Yeah, first and foremost, the permits are meant to regulate, okay? They are meant to regulate, and so they are not bad tools to have. It's the way we apply them. The commodity that's been most affected by these permits has been maize. And as we said, maize is still the big subject in agriculture.
Yes.
Regardless of who is in administration. And regardless of how much we speak about diversification, we'll start from maize. Why? Because maize has got all the value chain players already structured. As I said, we've been 2 decades in surplus, and so a lot more structures of maize that support surplus markets, have been developed. Earlier on, we only had producers who sold to FRA, and FRA then they sold to millers directly. But because we've been in surplus, we therefore required extra, players who would hold the product, the commodity.
Yes.
And these are the aggregators, like AFGRI, like NPK, and all those people that have been playing in the sector there. ETG, they are all players in that sector. Now, those players come to play in a surplus environment. Now, when you're in a surplus environment, you have to make sure that those players are also facilitated to trade. The Grain Traders Association, when we were in the shortage, they were almost not there because whatever was produced was quickly consumed. So when you have now a surplus environment, even the way you apply the controls has to be different. Those tools like the permits and all that, those can be used in a very silent manner so that they don't alarm the markets. Why? Because look at it this way: if you're in surplus and then you issue and then you say no exports, isn't that shameful? How can you in surplus production refuse to get money? And this money is coming from other people outside your country. How do you deny your country revenue?
And then you want to go and borrow from other institutions.
And you even want to call media so that the whole country knows that you have actually slapped a ban, So the more formal things are done, the better for us. If these players in the private sector are given the drive to continue to trade, whether it's in grain byproducts or in the grain itself, that is the surplus for Zambia, especially that we sit in a post. As long as we have already identified how much we need, we don't need locally. That surplus should be allowed to be exported without talking about all these permit issues. You only come to talk about, or you do permits purely to allow or facilitate the trade. Then you can talk about restrictions only when you have surpassed your export levels, and now you're trying to hit into your national food security, and you're not too sure about your next production. So those are the things that need to be managed, and that's where those tools, permits, and so on are required, so that you don't risk your country. But when you know you're in surplus, the surplus needs to be traded, and that's how you can grow this sector of these new aggregators, because this has been a new sector. It has both small, medium, and large aggregators. These players play a very significant role in the value chain. So you can't use the permits to be cutting some of them out. Then you are losing the opportunities to exploit your surplus position.
You also lose the confidence of your neighbors.
Correct.
Because as soon as they sign contracts, they're not actually sure if they'll sign that contract.
Yes.
Knowing that at any time
you may stop.
The country might impose a restriction.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
And I think if we exploit further, we'll know that a lot of companies have been affected by that.
Very well, very big time. A lot of them, their capacity has shrunk. Because look, all the things in the agriculture sector, they take time to develop capacity. Your production base, with Monawasa introducing that winter maize. What happened? Capacity on farms, people started investing in dryers.
Yes.
So that they can dry that maize in the rain season. There was early maize that was brought in. It also required artificial drying. So all these things were capacity which were being developed. So anytime you disturb anything in the value chain, these capacities also break down. Even the production system. If you imagine yourself on a farm, and you are told now you can grow and export as much as you can. What happens first? It triggers your mind, I need to increase my hectarage. Your increasing of your hectarage demands that you need to bring in more equipment. Bringing in more equipment means that you also need more people on the farm. So if you are developing that capacity in that direction, and then all of a sudden you break it, it means this whole capacity now has to break down. To resuscitate it, it also takes time. So these are things that we should have taken advantage of and continue to build up, so that by now we should not be talking about even using these permits and things, because we would be in surplus supply, just like we're in seed. The permit is only used to facilitate you to trade, finish, not to stop you.
All right.
Not to limit you. It's made to facilitate trade.
Marx,
Yes.
I have a problem that I need you to speak about a little bit. Do we have a problem with the management of stock feed in this country? Because the producers and the government have been going back and forth.
I don't think we have a problem. In fact, we have grabbed, and that's a sector that has also grown quite significantly. And imagine that 50% of most of the stock feed is actually maize. So that's how dynamic maize is. So when we have produced a lot of maize, and then we've produced enough soils, it means that that sector is working very well. All they bring in are additives to balance up the formulations.
Yes.
So I don't think that we've gotten it wrong. I think that we're on the right track. And it's good that it's allowed to run as it is, without much controls. But the going back and forth, I think it's been much more around the bran, because our neighbors demand more bran than we probably use. So the bran issue, I think let's treat it as an opportunity. Let's get more maize ground. You know, even those permits we're talking about, I mean, if you can have control, say, if we have control on maize, why should we have control on melly meal? Because that melly meal, we have already gotten value from it as grain. By milling it, we have even got more value from the jobs, from the taxes, from the millers and all that. So at that point, you could even stratify and say, okay, because we're in this great surplus position, melly meal, free trade, free transboundary trade, then we can manage or control this with the permits on the grain. What are you doing? You're offloading your markets and allowing more produce to come in. And the more we get that going, the more you stimulate production. Yeah.
All right. As we're land linked, as the president, the late president, had specifically stated over and over again.
Yeah.
As we're a land-linked country and having some neighbors with domestic production challenges, how can we take advantage of this in terms of production? I am speaking about livestock, crops, and seeds, which we already spoke about earlier. I'm sure you can expound on this. We import fish, and yet we have more water bodies, like I said earlier on, than any other country in the region. Please note that Zambian poultry is expensive to export to our neighbors if we're going to target Angola and DRC, for instance. Can we get cheaper chickens exported to these two countries? Because remember, we're competing with Brazil and South Africa. We've got a caller. Okay. Hello? Hello, you're through to the big issue? You're through to the big issue. We're discussing the business of agriculture. How can I help you? Morning.
Hello?
Yes. What's your contribution, madam? What's your name and what's your contribution?
My name is Mubanga.
Mubanga, where are you calling from?
Mubanga. I'm calling from within Lusaka.
Yes. What is your contribution
I
or
did find
question?
your program midway,
Okay.
so I may ask something that you've already explained.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I wanted to find out, when the country says we have enough maize to feed the nation, meaning we can now export. How much is that? I mean, what period are we saying we've got excess? Because I'm thinking of, if we have a drought of, say, 4 years, 7 years, do we have enough to last us that, such that we should be able to export? And then second one is on the feed. Every person that is doing poultry is complaining. And yet 2 days ago, I did hear the Millers Association complaining that they want the ban to be lifted. So how can the poultry people complain that they don't have feed and the feed is too expensive, and yet we want to export? So for my view and observation is that farmers want to export more than feed the nation, because an average chicken now is costing 100 kwacha, because even the chicks are rare to find, because everything is now first priority is for export than to feed our own. So where are we going wrong? And then the other one is, was it last year? I think the government said they had banned the importation of onions and potatoes, and yet the local farmers didn't have. This is when then the price just went so high up. For one onion, we're getting one small onion for 7 kwacha. So I'm wondering how then do we make a ban before we have produced enough? So I would rather there's a mechanism where you say, before you make a ban, empower people to produce so much, excess in even, so that we have excess to feed ourselves and the rest to export. So where do we go wrong? I'm a layman actually about this farming thing. This is why I'm so confused.
All right, Mr. Mbunji will address that.
It.
All right, thanks, Mwanga. Mr. Mbunji is going to
you.
address that. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Mwanga. I think the first part is talking about the surplus. What period? The surplus is calculated on an annual basis, on our annual consumption. That's where they're able to establish against what has been produced that year and whatever has been carried on from the previous year. And then you say, this is our surplus, which we beyond what we require as the country for consuming, for brewing beer, for making stock feed and all those things considered. So that allows us then to get the surplus to export. Is it a good thing? It's a bad thing? It's a good thing and should be done.
She's saying, what do we do in case there's a period of 7 years?
In case there's a period of drought.
Yes.
Mwanga, we should also thank God that He gave us such a blessed country. Even our one of our worst droughts, which I saw myself in living, 1991-92.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Cut the country in half. The lower side was serious drought, but the upper part of the country, we had still enough rain. So we still, rely on our fatherly, God-given environment that we are so blessed that the country has not yet registered a complete dry whole country. One section of the country grows food. But what we should be talking about is making sure that the areas where the production is assured remain highly productive to be able to feed the country, even if the other half goes into total failure. Those are the issues we should be addressing. We should be addressing the issues of utilizing our surface and underground water to be able to irrigate, so that in case of a calamity, we can go back to the Mwanawasa winter maize production and still be able to be afloat. But not necessary to say that now we will restrict the exports because we might have droughts in future. No, we should be prepared for any drought to happen and still be able to feed ourselves. And even from rainfed alone, it has proven that this Zambia can still be able to feed itself. So you can take some bit of comfort with that. Ban on export of feed is a bit unfortunate because we still have a lot of maize. And the season is very soon we are planting again. So I think these are also issues that linger around the lobbyist organizations. that tend to be loud with government, and then government listens to them, and then suffocate trade. But let these matters be dealt with in an expertly manner, and show both sides of the coin, so that we don't lose opportunities, to grow wealth for the country from agriculture. As I said, these exports are opportunistic. So you need to be prepared in an opportunistic manner to be able to respond. So we should also be reviewing these things quickly, because the problem of exciting government to certain interest group advances is that government is usually slow in responding. When they express that ban, it means they've taken so much time before they can put a ban. But also to remove the ban, it also takes them so much time. In both cases, you lose opportunities. So I think that the more we can be self-regulating internally, it will help us. But no one goes into production with the view of only exporting and avoiding to feed themselves. No. Even the producers, even the manufacturers, they have an obligation to feed Zambia first. And what is extra is what they send out. And what we are saying is, if we can all focus on regional supply or regional production, it therefore means that we will never run short, because there will always be food, because we want to feed more people than what we have in Zambia. So, and that's what we have referred to, within the seed sector. The veggies, again, these are same issues, but you may wish, Mwanga, to know that when we took over independence, we used to wait for cabbages to come from Zimbabwe, Salisbury, and South Africa at Soweto, and that's how Soweto was created. So the fact that we have gone far to be able to get all these products ourselves, it just challenges all of us to be more productive. And we should accept that we have become more productive. Why? Because of all these small holdings that surround Lusaka now, urban agriculture has become very, very exciting. A lot of our fresh vegetables are all coming from these small holdings. So let's ramp up the production.
Yeah, she's not happy with the onions and potatoes
being very costly.
Yes.
Oh yeah, those are demand and supply. So the producers should mark the moments when the onions and tomatoes are very high, and make sure that you have your production at that time.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get back to that question. I was saying, as we are land linked and having some neighbors with domestic production challenges, how can we take advantage of this in terms of production? I am speaking about livestock, crops, and seeds. We import fish, and yet we have more water bodies than any other country in the region. Please note that Zambian poultry is expensive to export. Angola and DRC can get cheaper chickens from South Africa and Brazil, and yet we are next door and unable to export in great numbers.
Yeah, Chanda, you see, a lot of our land-linked conversation is also limited by infrastructure. Yeah, you can look on the Angolan side, look at the Congolese side. How well linked are we with them? Quite weak, especially with Angola. So the cost of transportation eats us. But these are the areas where we needed to have made investments, so that we can tap on all these big potentials. If they're saying that Angola or Rwanda is almost as a costly city, almost close to what country is this now? If Angola is close to Switzerland. So you can imagine the opportunities we have. We have big opportunities. So why should we allow Brazil, which is so far away, to be supplying Angola? The difference is because Brazil sits on the ocean. Angola sits on the ocean. So the infrastructure is already very well connected. While Zambia linking with Angola on land, not even a single road enters Angola correctly. So these we need to address. But the opportunities we have is now. Is now. Why? Because we are in the best position to be able to produce. We're in the best position, the nearest of all our neighbors who are still in short supply, and we have this huge opportunity of being the only producer of conventional food crops. Non-GMO.
Yes.
And that differentiates us from our competition with South Africa. And we should take advantage and sell that. So we have been sleeping all these years, and we are allowing these countries to rebuild. Let's make them lazy by feeding them. so that we continue to feed them.
We make them lazy.
Yes, let's make them lazy. Let them know Zambia, we always get food from Zambia, so let's not farm. Let us do something else. The fish, why are we overfishing? It's because there's huge demand. So we should be growing more fish rather than us complaining. So I think we should, I hope this is part of the transformation this new administration will be talking about. So that instead of seeing the problem, we see it as the opportunity for us to do even more. Because we have the water. And when we harvest the fish, we only remove the fish, we don't remove the water. So we need more fish in that water.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me digress a bit. We will remain on... We'll talk about something else related to Angola and DRC.
Yeah.
Let's explore the issue of creating trade centers at the border towns. Look at how horrible Kasumbalesa is. I'm sure you've been there. I was shocked because I kept hearing about Kasumbalesa, but I decided, let me go and explore this for myself. For years and years, it's been like that, and people are content.
Yes.
Now, I'm thinking, how do we arrest this, if not by building extensive trade centers at the border towns, where you have bulk cold rooms, you've got banking facilities, you've got all kinds and manners of storage facilities that will cater for all crop and livestock. How would that not be implemented now to serve better the exports that we're talking about?
Correct, Chanda. That's the thinking we need. That's one option. That's an option. But that's the kind of thinking we need at looking at those. Actually, don't even go to Kasumbalesa. Go to Soweto. Are you happy as a Zambian seeing your cabbages almost being displayed on the floor?
No.
You find them on the street. Where's our sanitation? Where's our hygiene? What is that showing us? Showing us that Soweto market alone is not adequate. We need more Sowetos. And these are the jobs that our administration should be giving us. We should not lose those good opportunities for people to start hiding, carrying meal out of Zambia to go into DRC, using forest routes. No, let the things be done normally. But that takes administration, takes different thinking for people to look at those opportunities happening like that. Even the border, which looks a bit organized like the one for Tanzania in Nakonde, look at that sort of... we can still do those things better. Definitely we can do them better, organized, and government is losing revenue actually by letting those situations continue that way. Because if they were formalized, we'd be getting taxes, make people making licenses and so on and so forth. Revenue would be raised from that.
The new government has got a lot to do. Okay, let's make it a bit more exciting. Let's talk about Zambia National Farmers Union, JITAS, FRA, and ZAMES. How can we bring cohesion to the commodities trade?
The good thing is that you see all these players play a certain role in the value chain.
Yes.
ZNFU are no more than just producers. But as an organization, I'm sure it's now in public domain. They're still struggling with their integrity issues and so on. So, yeah. And, very sad, but they're there. The other grain traders, I think they're very active. It's just that they just get hit up when these bans and so on, take place. All these other people you have mentioned, like aggregators, I think FRA is not even an aggregator. That is for national food security.
Actually,
and that role should be, and I'm glad that it's now Honorable Mtolo at Minister of Agriculture, because he knows the foundation of FRA.
He knows everything.
He knows everything. So as long as FRA is put in its rightful context and responsibility mandate, that should give us space for private sector to thrive. And that also gives Mwanga some degree of comfort in the sense that there's an institution called FRA that is meant to take care of those, hunger months
Yes.
So she will still have her shima. But for these organizations I've mentioned, yes, they have a role to play, and it's very important, and they should function under this transformational process. I mean, the days when, for example, ZNFU would strongly be a lobbyist group and so on, I think those days are also gone. That aggressive talk, which used to be there under the Commercial Farmers Bureau, is gone. Now it has to be engagement and finding your place to play. It will be sad. It's sad when I saw that some people were promoting open pollinated maize with Zambian industry, which is so developed with hybrid maize. Mm-hmm. And they even pivoted that onto a national program to more than 30%. It was just sad. That should not come from ZNFU.
No. The odd one out in that list I gave you is clearly FRA.
Yes.
All right. And I think the baby...
Because it's public.
Yes, the baby in the group is Zames.
Yes.
Zames has got a lot of good intentions.
Yes. But hasn't had the political will.
Yes.
Which is very unfortunate.
It's unfortunate because they've struggled.
Yes, I agree with you, Chanda. And look at it this way. We have spoken about being in a surplus position for 20 years. Mm-hmm. There are transactions that are small, which you can do. There are transactions that are big, that you need different platforms. And these are the platforms that these new aggregators play. Then there are other even mega transactions that you need, platforms like the Zames to play. And Zames is well structured for that. And if we are serious about being in a surplus position, Zames should have been already up and running to deal with us, the mega, and wire people up in a commodity exchange. Mm-hmm. Look, our own stock exchange, players there are from all over the globe. Mm-hmm. And that's the role that Zames plays too. They will link us to many other platforms outside the region electronically and make physical things happen. So we needed to invest in that because it's a necessary player in a surplus, in agricultural surplus environment.
What's funny is the Zimbabweans just launched their commodity exchange.
Even when they're in shortage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
pure political will. Pure political will. Because when there's political will, Zames would have found the rightful partners to give them the guarantees for that kind of transactions. They would have secured all their financing, and they would have even been structured properly to function in the market.
Oh, Zames right now is running on the looser backbone. That should not be a problem.
But Luce is different. We are agriculturists. We are talking commodity here.
Yes.
We are not talking bonds and shares which you don't see by eyes. We are talking about maize which you feel and touch.
There is a marriage there.
Yes, there's a marriage, but Zames. Look at Zames this way, I think. That you are in Washington, you've got an order in Angola. Mm-hmm. You have heard that there could be grain in Zambia. Mm-hmm. How do you reach and make the connection to play? So that's Zames. Because Zames shows you that right now I've got so much stock sitting in Mukushi or sitting in Mbala. Mm-hmm. And if there are any buyers globally, someone in Washington who has an order in Congo would like to pick from Mbala and deliver to Congo than pick from Lusaka.
Yes.
Yes, and that Zames makes that happen. Is that a bad player? No. So we need them.
How can we encourage government?
I hope it's part of the transformation.
This transformation.
This is transformational. That's why I'm very excited to hear these words, because they're real. It's transformational. Zames will employ people, so it's also job rich. It speaks to the buzzwords of the new administration.
Okay, we'll come back to
So
that.
I am hoping that this happens.
We'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
We need to unburden government from the excessive expenditure on maize purchases and storage. I have always been of the opinion that maize has been used as a weapon by the past regimes to win votes and also to distort the market. The private sector has access to the best storage facilities. You and I know this.
Correct.
My question is, how can we actualize private sector participation in food security so that government is less invested in storage, maintenance, and maintain a high quality of stored commodity?
I think the structure has been there, but just the way we have administered things. Why do I say the structure has been there? It's because we have got government involved in FRA. They've got their storage sheds. Second, we have got aggregators who have their own private sector storage facilities, which are totally private. Then you've got the millers who actually process. That's if we're talking maize. They also have their own storage capacities. Even the other commodities, they're also structured in similar manners.
Yes.
So why these are not being allowed to thrive? It's just lack of political will, Chanda. I mean, I can't think of any other reason, because these structures are already there. Why should AFGRI close now in Zambia and go back to South Africa when they had all that capacity to be able to purchase crop, store it, and release it when it's required by millers? What we need is government to simply put their foot down and say, okay, processors, you have to run your businesses. You will not go to FRA to ask for subsidized crop. FRA crop is strictly meant for a national food security. There has to be a disaster to release the food reserve maize. That way, and we have to be consistent with just a signal like that. The millers will be willing to store their own maize to run their businesses. If they need grain, they'll go to the aggregators.
Yes.
Who are the AFGRIs, the ETGs, and all those other players. Even Zames can facilitate them with trade with stocks. All those players begin to play and speak with millers. Not millers going to harass government. No, government is not private. Let them go and run their businesses. But the millers take advantage because government wants to be so responsible when they tell them, no, if you don't get FRA, the price of maize is going to go up. And you see, all these games come in because our excess production is always limited. If we target to feed the region, all this talk will fizzle out because there'll be so much crop that the cause to overshoot prices and threaten government will stop. Because when there's so much excess crop, the crop will be flowing from aggregators to the millers without requirement for. But our millers are so structured that come November, they start saying, oh, wait, but everyone knows by that time, yes, there's going to be a reduction in crop availability, and therefore the price of maize or mealie meal is going to to stretch up a bit. So we should be able to accept that, but the millers should not hold anyone at ransom, but we should allow the millers to run their businesses as private sector, not to be relying on food reserve, because that pushes food reserve now from being a national security stock manager to becoming a trading player in the market. And at that point, you begin to crowd out the private sector. And that's why the distortion comes in. Because if the food reserve now chips in with subsidized maize, what happens to the maize of the aggregator, which was bought early in the season, and wants to take that opportunity to supply at that time when prices are beginning to stretch up? So all that investment by the private sector would have gone to water, simply because you brought the Food Reserve Agency in. And we did that. It's not like this is strange. No. I remember one of the administrators, they stood their feet. Millers, you've got to run your business. We ran 2 seasons without any major price fluctuations. And then another administration came, boom, went down again to what we have now. So that has to stop. But it requires courage. It requires courage. And it requires people being frank to make the private, and that's the consistency you need in policy, so that a miller from January knows that they have to prepare themselves completely well for the season. They have to, because the aggregators operate on the strength of the millers, because the millers are the off-takers. For example, if you get the case of maize, they're the off-takers. So they'll tell them how much maize they need for their business. And then they'll be flowing this crop, which the aggregators have managed over time. And the management of the aggregators with their overheads will not, take the price through the roof. We just need to do it 2 seasons, get the confidence going, everything will begin to run.
All right, let me push you. Would you say there's dishonesty on the part of the millers and incompetence on the part of the FRA?
I wouldn't use those terms.
I want us to use those
terms.
No. You know why?
You know why?
No,
because these are businesses.
No.
And businesses have to survive. If they find an opportunity, they'll use it. That's just how business is structured. Even yourselves here. Mm-hmm. Why did you set up the station? There's already so many of them.
There's no one who does talk radio.
Correct. So you saw that. And did you tell the others, hey, please, can you do talk radio?
No, they're pretending to be doing talk radio. They are trying to do talk radio, but unfortunately, if it's not Capital FM, it's not talk radio.
You see?
Yeah.
You see?
No, why I say that is very simple, because FRA knows their mandate very well. All right. And they reached a point, in my opinion, that they became a rubber stamp. You can't find it normal to carry the costs of storage and maintenance just to come and give it to a miller. The miller will not be bothered anymore. They'll just wait. FRA has got everything sorted. And come November, October, whatever period it is, we're going to grab that maize.
So Chanda, I think that then make common sense even to those in authority?
It doesn't. That's why
they see the costs. But the unfortunate part is, Chanda, the people in authority have a responsibility to make sure that Zambians feed. And it's at that point.
At whose expense?
At public expense.
That is why we have expensive maize.
And that's a problem, because FRA is not a private sector organization. It's a public organization. So by being public, they also have to sing to the mandate of the shareholder. It's just like you here. You can easily change your editorial policy. So that's the way you should look at it. FRA is purely there as an agent. So being an agent, it has to sing to the tune of
their masters.
Call them pipers. Yeah. So that's how it operates, and government has a responsibility anyway. So because they have that responsibility, that thing comes to play. But the thing is that government has not been firm enough to be able to sound to the millers, you are private operators, run your businesses. Okay. And then FRA has been pushed to the extent to take responsibilities beyond national food security. They become now a buyer in the market. When they become a buyer in the market, I'm not saying it's wrong in some areas, because some areas you only have food reserve agents as the major player. There's almost no private sector.
That's the original. But remember, that's the original mandate.
No, not
to go into the deep.
Not necessarily. The original market is to manage national security stocks. Okay? How they procure them is not the issue. In fact, when they started, and I'm sure the Honorable Minister, if he's listening, knows this very well, they would buy from 3, 4, 5 commercial farmers and keep. And that was done. And they had the stock, and those were cost-effective stock. They were cheap. They were cheaper to buy. But now, because of the need to develop rural markets, which is not a bad cause, it's a correct cause, to develop rural markets, they've happened to be pushed. No, go and buy in the most removed areas, where the private sector is not available. It's logical, because supporting what? It's bringing those people in the removed areas back into the economy. But the cost of doing that is much higher. And the public, and that's where you are investing public resources into. Private sector is not able to invest in there. But if we can digress this conversation, what you should be asking yourself is, so in the depots of the Food Reserve Agency, in the depots of the Food Reserve Agency, what do they do outside the main season purchases? How can we allow our developed private sector to continuously develop those markets beyond the maize purchasing season? To me, those are the key questions. Why am I bringing this? It's because the Food Reserve Agency is one of is the main organization that's even able to have the infrastructure for developing markets in those rural areas. So why? They will have screens, to grade the crop. They'll have scales to weigh the crop. They have storage slabs to keep the crop, some places even warehouses and so on and so forth. So if we're to be arguing, I would truly be arguing to say, look, let these food reserve agency markets or depots be functional throughout and allow private sector to come and purchase from those same markets, so that everybody knows market for commodity is there, and it's there throughout the year, 365 days.
I see that far. Yes.
So you can see there you begin to use those facilities in a more robust and more private sector involving situations. And even if you're developing new crops or new commodities, you can use those same infrastructure to be able to allow private sector to operate in the same environment, because you've got those basic infrastructure, which is so difficult for private sector to be able to supply in those markets.
Okay, FRA has got an advocate.
Yeah,
I hope they are listening. Let's go somewhere else now. Let's explore the issue of low crop yields per hectare as well as low livestock production. Our neighbors in Zimbabwe and further afield in South Africa are able to attain high yields per hectare. How do we as a nation improve on this? Do we change our strategy of not relying on extension workers and instead enhance direct training of farm managers and farm owners? I think
we need both.
I see a detachment from before. There's been a detachment because what happens is that your average farmer will be waiting for extension worker to come and give knowledge and guidance, while the farm manager is limited to what he knows. Yeah. And the farm owner has employed the farm manager and thinks everything is hunky-dory.
Yeah. I mean, the low productivity is really a big problem, but we have the opportunity there to change things. Don't just look at extension as physical extension, it's physical head count of human beings reaching out what you can call extension to farmer ratio, but look at it also in a digital perspective, that probably we can reach more people digitally, since the mobile phone has become more available now countrywide, so we can reach more people in that context. But it's sad for me as an agriculturist, knowing what is right, to see that the small-scale farmer, first of all, even our national yield, our national yield sits at 2-point-something tons per hectare, and yet the potential of these crops we have is much, much higher.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a huge gap there which we have not closed up. And I think experts have offered explanations, how to do it, but somehow we have just not clicked with that. Livestock, small-scale animal, a cow or a bull, carcass weight, you're lucky if it's 300 kilos. And that animals almost a ton, carcass weight, which are improved breeds.
Yeah.
So why haven't we changed this robustly? Even worse, Chanda, there's a disease called Newcastle for chickens. Can you imagine how important a chicken is to households, rural households? Even our cultures and so on, when your father when your son-in-law visits you and so on, they play a very important role. But come July, August, those chickens die from Newcastle. The tablet of Newcastle is 20 kwacha. And that Newcastle tablet, one of it, will treat 1,000 chickens. So if you can treat 1,000 chickens with 20 kwacha, why are we failing to protect these birds? Okay, so this is a very sad thing, but I think there should be more conversation in the transformational nature. So we change these things, because the skills are there. Most of the vets that have been trained, they know how to do artificial insemination.
Yeah.
You don't need to move animals from one place to another. We can also move the animals themselves physically. If you go to Southern Province, I think that transformation or that transition has started. The animals in Southern Province, you see quite a lot of boron genotypes into the livestock. You see a number of I'm seeing now even Bosmara is getting into the livestock. So the quality in the south is improving. But as we go north, it's still streets behind. So we need to find a way to get that done, and I hope this will be part of the transformational thing. Especially, I mean, the president was very passionate about it.
Well, he's a livestock farmer.
Yeah. So I'm sure he's, even our goats. I mean, it's literally everything we can change, and within a space of 2 years.
Yeah.
With the commitment it requires.
Well, let's see if he's gonna have the right team to drive this bus of his. I was going to touch on stock feed and the seed industries, but I think you explored that much earlier.
Yeah.
We can skip that because it's adequately catered for locally and for export as well. So let's see. Okay. I was gonna.
No, this is a sector which holds lots of potential for this country.
Yes.
And even if you're just to pick one crop, do it well. It will offer us huge opportunities. Can you imagine we could move sunflower from where it is now to the level maize is operating now? It has aggregators. It has got more crushers, more production, more. It can change.
And less complaints.
Yeah, less complaints.
Yes.
Less complaints. Our regulation things, and we should get away from there by stimulating our growth. If we produce more, all these regulatory things. I mean, if people understood how the seed industry, transitioned and then transformed to become a world-class. You may wish to know, Zambia is the biggest exporter of conventional maize seed in Africa. Is that not a good place to be?
It's awesome.
Why can't we do that for cattle, beef? Why can't we do that for poultry? Why can't we do that for soybeans?
New Dawn.
Huh?
The New Dawn government will make it happen.
Yeah, transformational.
Yeah. The previous government, we've spoken about this before, but I think let's put it to closure. The previous government used FRA at will. You and I know that. They used this FRA as an institution to distort the market. Government also bought excessively, thereby putting pressure on the treasury. They took a long time to pay for the grain from the farmers. Now, to avoid some of these problems, how best can we utilize the warehouse receipt system? In a statement, I'll give you an example of how bad things were because of the flip-flopping of policies. In a statement by Cargill, I think, the company stated that the decision to shut down its operations in the capital city was made in view of growth of illegal imports of vegetable oil from neighboring countries, and 260 jobs were lost. How many other agribusiness entities were affected by government's inconsistent policies and interference? 2 questions there.
Okay, I think let's start with the first.
Let's start with the...
Chanda, don't demonize the Food Reserve Agency. It's well meant. It's just being badly executed. And the cry of everyone is to always keep the food reserve in its lane, the lane of managing national food reserves. If we did that, then make the other players play their role. That is it. So food reserve sits there not as a spoiler. Not as a spoiler. It sits there as a caretaker of the country. And then you have government that has got a responsibility for all of us, you and me included, who have to use their own capacity. Unfortunately, some of that capacity sits in the Food Reserve Agency. And as I've said, some of that is stimulated by not being firm on decisions. Okay? So that we fall short. But naturally, Food Reserve Agency, in the way it was formulated and mandated, if they stick to that lane, we should be able to run well. The only diversion to that role is that that lane means they should be only participating to procure stock for national food security. 2, you can add that role of them developing the rural markets for the purpose of entry of the private sector. And as I've said, we should be thinking around, what about when Food Reserve is not buying? How can we use those facilities, those assets? They're public assets.
Yes.
How can we use those assets to further develop those markets and keep those markets active? Those should be the conversations. Now, coming to imports and all that.
I mean,
Look,
actually,
in this world now, we should all accept that you will not participate if you don't have a competitive advantage. And these are the areas we should be choosing for ourselves. Right now, in the oil industry, I think the bigger mover is not necessarily the oil, as I've said. The bigger mover is stock feed. So, in the way we're operating now, or if I'm doing a business structured around the oils, I'll structure it in that way, that my main product is the cake.
Yeah.
While oil becomes a byproduct. I think if you work your mathematics in that opposite direction, you might get it right. But if you get it in the direction that my core product is oil, then the cake is a byproduct. Yeah. Then these problems begin to hit you hard, but you can't stop it because you've signed the treaties with other countries. We want to export. I mean, do you think others don't? They also want to export into us. So it's this juggling of things and taking our competitive advantage points. I mean, in our conversation we have discussed here, you haven't heard me talk much about wheat and wheat products being exported and so on. Why? Because we produce expensive wheat. Our wheat is expensive. Why? Because it's irrigated. There are others who are producing rain-fed wheat, and that's cheaper, and so it can go all round. The advantage we have is that we are producing conventional wheat. It's non-GMO. So that's the voice we should be sending to the region. So people eat good food. They come to Zambia, know that they buy food which is non-GMO, and that none of our neighbors can compete with us.
Yes. Your final remarks.
My final remarks, it's been wonderful being with you on this shift. You're lovely guys. I think it's been wonderful talking to you.
We're going to get you back very soon.
Oh, to be gracious.
Yes. Yeah. On that note, we come to the end of this week's edition of The Big Issue. That was Mr. Marx Mbunji, an international seed expert and agriculturist, and we were discussing the business of agriculture. Please always remember to wear a mask, observe social distancing, and sanitize or wash your hands frequently to protect yourselves and others from COVID-19.
And vaccinate.
Vaccinate,
Correct.
Yes. The Big Issue is out.